Welcome to the Fleetistics educational webinar on GPS vehicle tracking technology. My name is Aaron Eiler, and I've been in the GPS vehicle tracking and asset tracking industry since 2001. And prior to that, I was actually a customer using GPS vehicle tracking technology in a national pest control company. So I cut my teeth on the customer side, which gave me a lot of perspective on the technology and what's important to a customer. And when we opened our doors in 2001, there were probably less than 6 GPS vehicle tracking companies online in the nation. And since then, obviously, the industry has grown quite a bit, and there are many times that number today. Today, what we're going to do is take a look at the industry as a whole and give you a general education on GPS tracking, telematics, the different services that are available, some of the options that are out there, and the way things are done, so you have a better general understanding of what types of information needs to go into your decision-making process. This is not a sales pitch. You won't see anything very product specific to what we have to offer. The things that I talk about today will be true of most technology out there. There's certainly things that are being developed or new services and things like that that may not be covered here today. But in general, this is going to help you frame your understanding before you go into the process of trying to work through where do you want to invest your money. And hopefully we'll create a roadmap for you that enables you to move through that process in a logical manner. Before you jump into this, you need to understand why it's important to invest your time. The list that you see in front of you is just a small list of the potential benefits. Any one of these things could have a major financial impact on your organization, either because of the improvement in customer service, the money saved because you're driving fewer miles, a reduction in your rolling cost per mile, maybe you're reducing your accident rate. Whatever those things are, the data is what this is all about. Data helps you make decisions, and good decisions drive your revenue and your opportunities. If you're not familiar with the technology because you haven't used it in the past, you maybe have heard about it, then this is going to be helpful for you, and we highly encourage you to sit through the entire presentation so you get the big picture, so when you're out talking to people, you've got a good education to start your conversation from. As a generalization, you've got GPS information or data that's coming to you from the GPS satellites in the middle, and everybody's kind of using that same information in different ways. You've got some big picture categories, vehicle asset tracking, kind of the driver and personal navigation, the mobile apps, that kind of space. Military has its own applications. Then you have other field services such as research and surveying and things of that nature. Obviously, we're here today to talk about vehicle and asset tracking. When you take vehicle and asset tracking, you kind of break it apart into two major categories. On the left-hand side, you have telematics and engine diagnostics, and I'll explain what those are. And on the right-hand side, you have the vehicle tracking pieces. And there's 3 general areas that come into play. And most of what we're going to be talking about is like the operational management type technology. We do have, or there is technology out there for vehicle recovery. We typically don't deal in that. There's very little data moving in that situation. It's kind of a platform where you might need to locate your vehicle once in 5 years. And, you go online, you hit a button, and, maybe you can find it, maybe you can't. And then passive technology, which really isn't around much anymore. Quite honestly, I can't even think of a single company that's selling passive technology. It used to be the technology that was available. I mean, real-time technology didn't come about until about 10 years ago. Actually, that's not true. It goes a little bit farther back than that. But the passive technology stored the information on the vehicle, and when your vehicle returned to a local branch or download point, the information was transferred off the vehicle, to a database. And the big advantage to that was there's no monthly fees. The equipment was, close to $1,000, but there were no monthly fees, so over time you could get that money back. The downside to passive technology is there's no real incentive for companies like ours, to continue to develop products and services for passive technology because there's no additional revenue after the initial sale. So passive technology has essentially gone to the wayside. Let's take a look at this. And I know this looks a little bit confusing, but I think I can make sense of it for you. If you look over here, these purple satellites are the GPS satellites. I often hear customers say, well, I'm talking to companies and I want to be able to communicate on the GPS satellites. The reality is that GPS satellites don't communicate back and forth. They simply transmit a signal that is received in this conversation by a GPS vehicle tracking device in a vehicle or on an asset, and that information is then moved from that vehicle to a website where you can see it through one of two different ways. We're going to take a look at the most popular, which is cellular technology, which is the 2B route. So the vehicle transmits the information from the GPS device to a cell phone tower. That cell phone tower recognizes the identification number in the data string, and then it passes it to a particular database, typically the GPS vendor's database. That information is then made available to the end user through a web portal. The other type of communication network is satellite communication. So you have GPS satellites, and then you have communication satellites, which are separate from that. The vehicle unit, a particular type of vehicle unit, transmits information to the satellite. The satellite then relays it back down to a relay station on the ground, and at that point it really becomes the same thing as a cell phone signal in that it routes it to a database and then makes it available to a user online. There are certainly pros and cons to the two different types of communication that are being done, and we'll kind of go through those in a little bit so you understand why you might want to go one direction or the other. It's a very, very important part of the conversation, especially if you have particular needs. We've got a couple definitions here for you. What is vehicle tracking? What's telematics? Engine diagnostics? These are the terms that you're going to hear on a regular basis as you go out and do your homework. GPS tracking is that vehicle location, route traveled, speed, altitude in some cases, where the vehicle stopped, how long it was there, that type of core vehicle movement information. It is the most basic portion of GPS tracking as it's available today. A lot of companies should start with just the basic vehicle tracking piece. They don't have a need for this higher level technology, which actually costs more. If you just need the simple basics, look for something that just does GPS tracking. Next is vehicle telematics. And to kind of summarize this up, your vehicle has a network of sensors on it. That information is being fed through the vehicle's computer system, and that's kind of all lumped into the category of telematics. Warning lights, it's seatbelt usage, it's failing brakes and things like that that kind of go into the telematics category. Also, accelerometer is a very, very big one for driving behaviors. Then you have engine diagnostic information, which is actually engine-related information, fault codes, status codes, things like that tell you about the performance of your engine. Maybe you've got a low oil pressure, or you've got a low battery or something like that that's affecting the performance of your vehicle in that regard. And engine diagnostic information tells you what's going on. Next is just a brief conversation about data management. Think about this. If you could spend $1 and earn $2, that would be a good investment. But if you can spend $1 and earn $5, that's a great investment. And when you manage data by using the same data that you're already paying for in other areas of your business, now you're getting more value for the same investment. And what I mean by that is integrating, let's say, GPS tracking data with your routing and dispatching application or your service ticket application. So you're using the vehicle's location information to confirm the arrival time, maybe the miles traveled to get to a particular service stop. So when you do your billing, you're ensuring that the miles billed to the customer is accurate. That's integration of data and getting more value out of your data. There's a couple different areas that data integration takes place. One is an API, and anybody that does application development these days understands what an API is, but it's a way of moving data from one place to another via the internet. And if you see a value proposition between the GPS tracking data and another system that you're using, contact your vendors and ask them, hey, look, can we get an API and bring this data in here, and how will that work? If that integration isn't already done, there's going to be costs for that. It's not just as simple, because I hear it all the time. Okay, well, can I just integrate the data? Well, what does integration mean? Integration means changes to the database structure. It means changes to the user interface. There may be logic. There's QA testing that goes on behind this. So there are processes that do have real costs. And if enough companies or customers are asking for it, then a lot of companies will just do it. But if you're the first one, or there's not a lot of requests, then you can expect a cost to go along with that. And some companies will just charge you just to bring other data in, even if the API is already written. You can kind of look at that in two ways. Companies need to make money if they're storing your data, if they're processing that information, if it's putting a load on their servers and such. Yeah, it's justified to charge something for that. So again, those are APIs. SDKs is software development kit, which is a deeper integration. It's more of a change to a UI or an addition to a UI. And SDKs allow you to do more custom work that's more in your control versus passing data to somebody, to a vendor, and letting them do what they want to do with the data and show it how they want. SDK is really typically something for an organization that has a developer staff or team in place that is familiar with that. Mapping integration is another place that we commonly see things moving around. A lot of organizations like oil and gas companies, certainly municipalities, use different types of maps, and being able to bring that GPS data into those other environments and display the vehicle location in relation to street lights and telephone poles and the other information that they may be capturing in these GIS maps increases the value of what they're seeing on those particular maps. So those are some of the different types of integrations that are out there that happen on a regular basis. Well, let's talk a little bit about the different types of fleet trackers. We've talked about vehicles, cars, trucks, vans, buses. We have equipment trackers, which are bulldozers, skid steers, and asset trackers, which are may be viewed generally more as like a stationary object, containers and generators. The truth is that the equipment trackers and the asset trackers are more interchangeable. You can put equipment trackers on vehicles. It's just depending on the environment, how the unit's constructed, what data you need to receive for that particular application, and that will drive really the type of equipment that you're going to put in place. I've seen trucks that are so terrible on the inside that a regular vehicle tracking system, which is designed to be in that generally protected environment, simply wouldn't last. You've got to put a ruggedized IP-rated device from an equipment tracker inside the vehicle, because when the guys hose the truck out, you can't have your GPS system getting wet. In the little picture there, this is a typical OBD tracker that you see here, and in this case, there is an adapter harness that allows the OBD tracker to be installed and permanently connected to the vehicle's OBD port, yet it still keeps the vehicle's OBD port available for mechanics. You have app tracking, which, personally I'm not a fan of. It's been something that's been consistently tried. There are certainly weaknesses to it, but there's weaknesses to all configurations. Typically, there's two problems with app tracking. One is you introduce the driver to the equation. Now you're counting on the driver being as reliable as an installed vehicle tracking system, and drivers don't always like to tell on themselves. And then number two is on a mobile device, there's always battery issues. And no matter how much you try to get people to cradle their devices so they have consistent power, invariably they forget for whatever particular reason, and all of a sudden you can't see them, and now you really can't hold somebody accountable for app tracking because the battery on their phone died. What we have here is an example of what a vehicle tracking route looks like. This happens to be high definition tracking. You can see the level of detail associated with this. You can actually see the curvature of the data in the background here as well as over here. And how your vehicle reports data is important. There's actually three components to this process. And when people tell you, hey, look, this is live tracking or real-time tracking, that's a bit of a misnomer, because information, transmitted across the internet has built-in latency. There are going to be delays because information is being routed through whatever network configuration there is between the cell companies, the GPS provider, back to you via the internet through your ISP. So all of those different things create latency, and the more frequently you transmit the information, the more expensive it is too. So with the GPS tracking business, you need to understand that there's a thing called a logging rate. How often is the device in the vehicle actually logging the vehicle's position and what it's doing? And in today's market, this is generally between 10 and 120 seconds. There is the transmission rate, because every time that you log a position, it's not automatically being transmitted. It is typically being saved and then transmitted at a specified rate, or based on a methodology or an algorithm, such as a change in vehicle speed and direction could also trigger a transmission. So there's different technologies at play here, and understanding what that's going to look like in your case may have an impact on the decision that you make on the platform that you want to get. So a transmission rate would typically be somewhere between 30 and 120 seconds. So the information that may be logged at 10 to 120 seconds will be held on the device until the units actually transmit the GPS information. That information goes into that database that I showed you on the previous slide, and it sits there until your map refreshes. And the map refresh rate is generally about 30 seconds. The map doesn't refresh every time new data comes in because your map would constantly be flickering. If you had 100 vehicles and every vehicle was in motion and the map refreshed every time a data point came in, you simply wouldn't be able to look at anything. With a map refresh rate set to about 30 seconds, as new information comes in, the map refreshes and any new information is received. Some of the newest cutting edge technology, this is actually becoming older school. And if you look at some of our other videos, you'll see Pro Service, which is, the map stays stationary and then the vehicle slides across that layer. And it's really pretty slick how it's done for emergency services and things like that. That level of refresh or visibility is often something that emergency services like. So again, you've got a log rate, transmission rate, and a map refresh rate. And when you're talking to people on the phone, ask them, what is, how does your system handle these types of things? So let's talk a little bit about cellular communication. You've got GSM and CDMA are the two primaries. Cellular communication is far less expensive than satellite communication, and because it's less expensive, you can move more data. If you think about this analogy, if you're talking on a cellular telephone, it costs you 3 cents a minute on average. If you talk on a satellite telephone, it costs you $2 a minute. And, there is a difference between voice and data, I understand that, but it's just an analogy to help you understand the cost differentials between cellular communication and satellite communication. What network you select or is available to you, just kind of depends on the system that you're looking at. Satellite communication gives you more access around the world. There's different types of satellite communication. You've got geosynchronous and you've got your geostationary, and you've got different pros and cons for each one of those. Typically these are things like a shipping company, you're moving cargo containers across the Pacific, something like that. You're going to be traveling into foreign countries and you want to track a vehicle during that trip. You're up in the very remote areas of Canada and Alaska doing oil and gas work. Typically that's when you're going to want satellite communication. So when you start to look at all of this, you're going to notice, all right, we've got monthly subscription fees that go along with this. Your fleet size, the communication network used, the resolution or the logging rate and the transmission rate of the data that you're getting, the service agreement period, and other services that are provided all come into the pricing variables that you're going to experience. So understanding what you need versus what you want is going to be an important part of our conversation here in a little bit. Prices will generally range from $15 a month to $35 a month for cellular data. 35 is kind of getting on the high side these days. GPS tracking equipment, will range anywhere from, let's say, $69 to $2.25 for equipment or asset trackers. And your satellite technology can cost you, $60 a month, depending on how frequently you want the system to transmit, the information. The question really comes in, who's using live tracking technology? Well, first of all, it's easy to set up. There's no lower initial investment than there was in passive technology. Live tracking allows for dynamic dispatching, remote workers, better field communication, things of that nature. You might see a wide variety of different devices that are out there. On the top here, we have an asset tracker, fairly typical, got a large backup battery in it. This is an OBD tracker. This is an asset tracker. This one uses satellite. These two use cellular. This one's got AA batteries in it that'll last 5 years. This type of device here might go 60 days on battery, but you can also see that it can also hardwire to get recharged when a piece of equipment is up and running. So understanding the device itself is important. Obviously, these two devices are weatherized, where this one belongs in the cab of a vehicle and is not going to, survive a wet type of environment. So what do you need to be thinking about as you're thinking about deploying or getting into this? And so we've got 7 steps here for you to take a look at and consider. Obviously, you can slow the presentation down. You can copy some of this information out. If you email us, then we can potentially email you an outline, things of that nature. We've got some other documents that are available to you if you want to take a look at them. But, these are the big steps that you need to be thinking about, especially in bigger organizations. In small mom and pop companies, you can make these decisions very quickly. You assign one person to it, they go out and they get it done. In a bigger organization where you've got a lot more money involved, you need to have a plan in place that can get approved and gives everybody a roadmap to work from. First thing is to commit to the plan and the process. Upper management needs to buy into this, and they need to say, yes, we want to do this. Go out and do your homework, come back with an ROI, and we will go from there. You need to figure out who's going to manage it and who's going to be responsible. Oftentimes it's this nebulous group and nobody's really in charge. Put somebody in charge, and somebody that can be your subject matter expert right from the beginning. And then most importantly for executive management, define success. What is it that you want at the end of this project? Is it an ROI of twofold? Is it an ROI of fourfold? Is it an accident reduction of 20%? Is it an insurance reduction? Is it a fuel savings? What are those things that you need? If you can get to the definition of success, anything that you can do after that is gravy. A couple of the essentials to an action plan. First of all is write down the top 3 features that you must have. This forces the group to focus on what's most important to the organization. After that, start to make a list of the top 3 things that you would really like to have, but if you can't get them, it's okay, because you know that you're going to get at least the top 3 things that you must have. Your like to have list can certainly be longer than that, and it always is. Maybe you want a particular type of map, or you want to report a logging rate, or you want a transmission rate, or you want an integration, that's going to be important to what you're trying to do. Figure those things out and come to an agreement, because when you're talking to GPS companies, you can ask them, can you do my top 3 issues? If the answer is no to one of your questions, then you simply say, thank you very much, this doesn't meet our requirements, and you move on. In more complicated scenarios, you cannot find one system that will do it all. In basic GPS tracking, yes, you can. There's lots of just basic GPS tracking available to you, but if you have a very long list of must-have requirements, you're going to have to give something up or do nothing. And we see a lot of customers that do nothing because they can't get 25 must-have items in a single platform. And you're foregoing a huge amount of return on investment because you can't have items 24 and 25 off of your must-have list. Next is include all of the departments in the decision and selection process. You may think, well, GPS tracking is about fleet and dispatching. It's actually about almost every aspect of your organization. Risk, safety, legal, payroll, operations, human resources, all of those organizations or departments will be able to get data from what is being collected and apply it to their part of the business. At a minimum, everybody should go through basic training so they at least understand what's in there. So when they see something, they can associate it to the data that's available, and they can go back and they can work with the platform. And then the last thing I'll say is, budget for what you think you're going to need in the next 3 years. Don't start until you have a budget in hand. You're kind of wasting your time and everybody else's. And think about it in a 3-year cycle. Technology in this business is changing every 18 to 24 months. If you hang on to a system for 3 years, that's great. You've got your money back at least 2, 3, 4 times over. After that, think about, okay, it's time for me to reinvest in a new platform. If there's new features and capabilities that I want, you can be willing to make that investment again. There's a national pest control company that every 5 years, they rip out millions of dollars of equipment and throw it in the trash can and buy the next thing, because that is their cycle for doing this, and they're doing it on a huge national scale. So, keep this in mind. You typically, it's like a cell phone. You don't keep a cell phone forever. At least most of us don't. You get rid of it every 2 years because there's new cool stuff out that brings additional value for making the reinvestment. What we have here is just a typical action plan. You can see it's specific. It's designed for large organizations, but this is the type of organization that you want to get from your GPS partner. And it helps you understand what the roadmap is. Just like you have a roadmap internally, this is the roadmap for testing, for deploying, for implementing the technology through several parts of the process. Next, you want to interview these potential partners. Collect information about the partners. We have a buyer's guide, which will be linked up below. You want to narrow the list down based on features and those top 3 things that you must have and the things that you would like to have. Receive basic presentations, create a short list of your vendors, and then pull those vendors in and get to know them a little bit. Have them come on site and really do a deep dive into what they have to offer. And spending a couple hours with them will really hedge your bets against getting something that isn't going to be a good fit for your organization. Next is the actual evaluation phase. So we have the project plan, we did the the presentations, and now we're actually going to go through the evaluation phase where we're going to install some equipment in the vehicles. We're actually going to run the platform. We're going to experience some of the training and the interaction with the GPS vendor. And I use the term GPS vendor to start with, but really it becomes a partner. And you want to have somebody that you can turn to get business advice and point you in the right direction, answer questions for you, things of that nature. But when you're going through this evaluation phase, you're going to be able to really get a feel for all of those different things. And one of those things is, are you a fit culturally? Do the people running the program on your side mesh well with the people running the program on the other side? And if the answer is yes, you can get more done. Couple of deployment considerations. You need to understand what the delivery timeframes are and build your own timeline for deployment. If you do this effectively, you'll find the rollout is much easier. You've got to be realistic about how many devices can be installed over what period of time, and how does that impact your daily operations. And if you order 1,000 vehicle units and you say, well, I want them installed in the next 2 weeks, guess what? You're going to get disappointed, and you're going to get poor performance. You're going to have install issues, and you're going to have service work, and you're going to spend 4 times the amount of time that it would take to properly deploy that number of units, which means ramping up. It means doing installs in 2 or 3 locations, and maybe the first week you do 50 units, the second week you do 200 units, the third week it's 300, 400, 500, and you grow that number until your deployment is done over a period of time. But it stays in control and is within the logistical capabilities of the 2 organizations. Next is policies and procedures. You want to develop policies and procedures that you can live with. And one of those policies and procedures is to address tampering, as well as driving standards, and that includes behavior and productivity standards, and include escalating consequences for the unwanted behavior. And if you're not willing to enforce them, simply don't put the policies out there. You don't want to publish something that you won't follow through on, because employees will quickly pick up on that. And you also have to be very even-handed in who's going to be tracked and what those consequences are and how that's going to work. In all of the organizations that I've ever worked with, I've always recommended that management get tracked as well. Managers have problems too. There's good managers and there's bad managers, just like every level of employee in an organization. So tracking your managers is a good idea from that perspective, but more importantly, it's a matter of leadership. And if you're willing to put this technology on somebody and hold them accountable, you should be held accountable as well. And Big Brother is a piece of GPS tracking technology, but it's a tool in a tool belt that a leader uses to run an organization or to lead an organization. So how the information is implemented has a lot to do with the leadership style and the policies of an organization. We get a lot of questions about companies wanting to do covert installs, and I want to catch my guys doing this and that. That's a great idea if you want to fire everybody, because you're going to be so mad at what you're seeing from most of your employees that you're not going to have a workforce at the end of the day. Covert installs also really breeds distrust between drivers and management. And instead of enlarging the divide, what you want to do is pull them in and share with them some of the technology that's going in, why it's going in, and what you hope to be able to do with this. I was talking to an organization the other day, and they have a high accident rate. If I can help curb your behavior before you get into that accident, then I'm going to help protect you as an employee who may lose sight of the fact that your driving habits aren't the best. So involve the drivers in the process, and have the people that are early implementers, the early branches, the employees driving that have had it on their vehicles for a while, have them come out and talk to subsequent branches and alleviate some of the stress over this, that management isn't breathing down my neck, I'm able to get home on time when I can't make a stop. The data from the GPS system clearly articulates why I wasn't able to. It's not my word simply that I wasn't able to get there. And we're going to have a link down in the notes where you can read more about introducing GPS tracking technology to your employees. Training is a huge one, and quite honestly, I would say 95% of our customers don't do a good job at training. We offer tons and tons of training, and so do our competitors, just to be fair. Training is where you get your ROI. And if you have one person in charge of the project and they're the only ones that know about what's going on, then you can expect the ROI equivalent to one person. If you have all of your managers trained, you have people in different departments trained, and you establish a baseline understanding of the data that's available, your company will develop decision making based on this data within the corporate culture. As in any organization, lower level management and employees will do whatever upper management is interested in most. And if this becomes part of the weekly conversation, the monthly conversation about the P&L, as well as operating expenses and employee turnover and things of that nature, then it becomes part of your business, and that's where you want it. To get it to that level, you've got to have training that is mandatory and is done on a regular basis. Any new hire should have to go through the GPS training, certainly in the management ranks. So we talked a little bit about the management team. Driver scoring is kind of the hot thing now, ranking the drivers based on all these different variables and putting everybody in a list from the top to the bottom, who's your best driver and who represents the greatest liability for whatever particular variables that you're scoring them on. We've got some really good driving scorecards out there. The whole industry does, as a matter of fact. There's dashboards, there's reports, lots of different options for driver scoring. And driver scoring in one organization might be different than driver scoring in a different organization. It might be based on different variables in our company versus another company. So if driver scoring is a big one for you, make sure that you look at the driver scoring and what goes into that calculation. Early on, we talked about the return on investment, and I will say that the most expensive decision that you can make is simply not making a decision at all. That means that you've got paralysis by analysis, and you're not going to do anything, which means you're not going to make any money back. You're not going to get control over certain issues that you might have in your organization. But if you do your ROI analysis and you find that your ROI is 10 times your investment, then it's a pretty safe bet. Even if you're 50% off, you're still able to make the investment and get ahead on the money that you'd be spending every month to collect that data. If you have, let's say, about 200 vehicles, and maybe your ROI is $500,000, per year or over a 2-year period, you have to look at that and say, in order to get that number, how much attention is this going to need on a day-to-day basis? And what I'm getting at is a program manager or a systems administrator to drive that ROI is a good investment. This is not a technology or a platform that can be on cruise control. It does take maintenance, just like a lot of different systems that you put into your organization. So think about budgeting for an actual systems administrator to drive this home for you. There are different types of warranties that are available to you, typically 1 year or lifetime. Just kind of depends on the platform and what you pay. If you're paying bottom dollar, then you can expect that you're not going to have a lifetime warranty. If you're paying top dollar and you don't want to deal with buying new equipment because of failures over time, then you can expect a lifetime warranty. Most service today is up to standard with any web-based application. There is downtime. It hardly ever happens. There's major financial institutions that go down. Everybody's doing everything that they can with the technology because security and reliability is a key component. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. If it happens, it happens. Typically, it's resolved pretty quickly. You've got a variety of different investment options, from buying to software as a service, leasing with a $1 buyout, and renting. The model that works best for you is just trying to understand how you guys do business, what your tax exposure is, and really what your capital expenditure limits are. If you're trying to knock down your tax liability, then buy the equipment. If you've got good cash on hand, buy the equipment. If you're doing a SaaS model, you're going to be paying for that equipment 2 and 3 times over the long haul because it's built into your monthly fee, and you're going to keep paying for it through the life of your service. And in conclusion, I want to say thank you. If there's anything that we can do for you, please give us a call. We'd be happy to talk to you and do some needs analysis with you. We do offer free trials, and like I said before, we'll link the buyer's guide and the introduction to employees in the video notes. And good luck to you, and we certainly hope that you make the right decision for your organization.